In the year 1543, the book De Revolutionibus Orbium Celestium was released, a book that confirmed for the first time that the Earth was not the center of the universe, but rather the sun. This book, released by Nicolaus Copernicus, was completely revolutionary and groundbreaking when it came out. But why are we talking about this? Well, because 481 years later, we will have one of the best representations as to how humanity managed to reach that conclusion in the anime called Orb. 何度でも何度でもスケブこのくらいよるのか Hello there. After a couple months in which I have been seeing a whole bunch of really highly praised anime, I finally reached one of the ones that I was the most excited to talk about, Orb. I'm someone that really enjoys watching stories that are extremely unique, and a story about how the heliocentrism actually become the norm is something that I have never seen before, even though I'm certain that multiple times in the past someone has done something similar to this. But this was my first time and I was really hyped to watch it. And it was actually very, very good. The story follows multiple protagonists trying to finally confirm the heliocentrism and trying to eliminate the former system, which was the geocentrism. Because this was in the era in which the church was gonna be calling heresy on everything, it was extremely rough. But oh my god, if it wasn't worth for the people that dare to defy the church. But before moving forward, I would kindly ask you to please leave a like, comment and subscribe. It would not only help the channel to grow, but it would help you to make me know that you actually like this type of reviews. And also, because I don't want to spoil you anything, I wanted to make this small cut. So before that, I will have spoiler alert for most of the story. And if you do not care about that, let's keep moving forward. Orb is one of those weird shows in which I cannot think of a poor argument to start this whole thing. I usually start talking about the bad things of a show if I'm doing a positive review, and doing the good stuff if I'm doing a negative one. However, Orb, as I'm saying, might be the first exception to this rule because there's nothing particularly wrong with it. There is one plot point which is unsolved, which I still do not know what happened. I don't know if it's something that is explained in the manga, but outside of that, that is not particularly necessary. Everything else just feels at least logical and good. All the story, the animation, the characters, the soundtrack, hell, even whatever minor detail that you could ever ask, all of them are at least solid, and nothing, as I'm saying, is particularly wrong. So I really am surprised because of that. But now, actually starting with the positives, I first want to give the honors to what is a very unique yet great way to deal with the protagonist groups. You see, something not that common happens in this show. We do not have a single protagonist, we do not have a single group of protagonists, but we have technically 4 groups of protagonists, and all of them are very logical. First, starting with why those exist, and that is because most of them die because of the such called heresy, which is something very logical. This is not a one person thing that, oh, I decided to discover heliocentrism and I got it right from the first go and now I'm a superstar. No, Copernicus was obviously the one that is the most popular, but that tracks back from dozens of years, if not hundreds of years, of people that at some point probably believed the same thing, but either they were too scared because of the church, or they were caught and their all discoveries were eliminated. So the fact that they don't just show you something like, oh yeah, this guy is the prodigy and is gonna all of a sudden discover everything by itself, is actually phenomenal, especially in the way that they subvert your expectations with the first protagonist, that is Rafal. Rafal is a very interesting character because of all of what he does. Actually, he just appears in the first 3 or 4 chapters of the story, which is part of the reason to why I put the spoiler alert. He barely appears, despite the fact that he is the main face in the poster, something that you would assume that would be extremely important. And as I'm saying, it's phenomenal how they subvert your expectations with Rafal. He is an absolute prodigy. He's potentially a borderline genius that is just extremely young, and therefore he is fantastic and a pretty obvious main protagonist in order to discover something that no one else has ever discovered or fully confirmed. It is a phenomenal way to show everything. How he started discovering it thanks to other person, how he starts developing his own theories, how everything goes right, how he does everything, how his father was actually someone that was also investigating a little bit about the space and the heliocentrism, and all of that is perfect, and oh, he died. The author of this manga, and therefore the whole story in the anime, was not scared at all to eliminate what was the obvious number one character that would be phenomenal for it to be a protagonist. Smart, really young in order to have plenty of time to try to confirm this theory. That doesn't matter. He is out. And instead we go to the second group of protagonists, in which the main protagonist of this second half or second part, which is Oxy, is actually someone that is basically a peasant. He doesn't know how to write, he barely knows a little bit about how to read, and he is someone that is very undecisive. He is even scared to watch the sky, something that you know is very important if you are trying to prove something that comes from the sky. Watching it at the very least. Yeah, he was extremely scared because of certain reasons, and that was the guy that was the main protagonist for the longest time in the show, after a pseudo prodigy in the first part, which is phenomenal. He's not the one that is doing the most amount of discoveries, but the fact that he is the point of view or the perspective that we saw the most is very good, because that is the perspective that we as humans would actually get more often than not in that type of situation. Obviously the average human would love to say that they would be like Badeni, but in reality most of us would be Oxy. We would not have any idea of what is happening, we would not understand all of these weird calculations, all of this sightseeing the sky to try to define something that seems almost impossible to define or almost impossible to confirm. Yet that is how he is doing it, that is what is happening, and that is phenomenal. After Oxy we have more protagonists. Both of them, the two main protagonists that we have afterward, are more in line with what you would expect for it to be someone that actually can confirm heliocentrism. They are characters that are way smarter than Oxy. They can read, they can write, and they can do it from a long time before what we see in the story. But anyways, I don't think that it's important to talk about them now, because I now want to talk individually about the most interesting characters. And obviously we have to go back to Rafal. Rafal is the perfect first protagonist to prove you everything in terms of what he truly is and how humanity is. He represents the pure curiosity of exploring the unexplored, how discovering or finding out that something doesn't quite get it right and that there's something more logical behind is actually like something that we as humans would go out and watch. And as I'm saying, he represents all of that in a perfect way. He is way more intelligent than the average kid. He is the by far most intelligent kid in his whole class, and probably he is smarter than most other characters that appear in the story. Yet, he is still a kid. So it's normal that he does a couple of mistakes that end in his own demise. And even then, all of its development feels organic. It's not that he just randomly discovers heliocentrism. He was taught the heliocentrism by another character, and he starts developing from there, which makes a lot of sense. He is going and going into becoming a smarter and smarter person that is discovering things by itself. That just because he made a couple of mistakes is the reason as to why he ends up dying. Then the following trio is Badeni, Oxy, and to a lesser extent Yolenta. They are easily the main focus for the longest time, and they show the most amount of different aspects of how it is to discover something. We see in Badeni the cruel part, or maybe what is the pride of the ones that are trying to discover something. He doesn't want anyone else to take credit if he managed to discover this whole heliocentrism, and if he is able to actually confirm it. He is, as I'm saying, the showcase of the true scientist of the past. Someone that might not precisely care about what he's discovering, but more about the fact that he is the one that is doing it. In current day and age we can see it to a certain extent, but for the most part these scientists are relatively happy or not angry to share their knowledge. But he was not like that. We also have Yolenta, which is a fantastic pseudo-protagonist because of what she is. She is a woman in the 15th and 16th century, and you know damn well what that means. She was basically discriminated. She was someone that was never taken into consideration. She was by far the smartest person in the place that she was working, or very likely to be the smartest, yet she was never given credit because she was, once again, a woman. Anoxy was a guy that was scared of everything. He was very scared of heavens and God, and that's why he was scared of watching the sky. And it's this group that is the perfect representation of what is most of the dirty work in order to discover something or in order to make something work. They are not the superheroes. They are not three academics with extremely high regards that are the geniuses that everybody knows that they are genius, and all of them praise because of that. No, we're talking about one cleric that was demoted because he wanted to know more, a woman in the already mentioned 15th century, and a guy that barely could maybe slightly read and could not write at all. It was a perfect representation of so many real things in which maybe they are not the ones that are ultimately doing everything and making the face of the quote-unquote discovery, but they are the ones that are the most important. Kinda like how in several other stories in real life we have seen multiple people that were not given their credit despite the fact that they might have been as important as the faces of it, if not more. And I really enjoy them because of that. We also have Dragna, which might be the weaker of the protagonists, yet she's still very interesting. She doesn't go for this whole discovery of the heliocentrism. She is the one that goes for it because of money, which is also another real life type of human. The person that doesn't care about the discovery because, oh my god, we are helping people, but rather because you can gain a benefit from that. Which is also extremely valid because at the end of the day, it's the 15th century. Even having slightly more money than others can be a huge difference. compared to what it is in current day and age. She also develops more and more, and she goes further into actually believing in the theory, but even then I think that the representation of what she is more important for the most part, even though the last couple chapters of her are absolutely splendid. There's also Albert as another protagonist. I mean, he is kinda like the person that ends up doing something, but I don't care that much about him. He is just like the final phase and the one that kinda gets the last, hope of it, and he somehow ends up being the main protagonist of the story of heliocentrism, even if he's not the main protagonist of this story. But obviously, the most important character in this whole show is the face of the church. There's a reason as to why I haven't mentioned the church, other than the fact that they were evil. There's multiple different characters that appear over the years. This is not a story that goes from just one month to the other. This goes for over 30 years, and if we count Albert as well, this is probably like almost half a century of story. Yet there is one character that appears throughout the entire of it, and that is Novak. Novak is easily the most influential character in this whole story. He is the Inquisitor of the whole story. For anyone that doesn't know, an Inquisitor is basically the one that calls others into heresy and kinda purge them, either directly or indirectly. He does it in a more indirect way, yet ultimately he is the main contributing factor as to why the heliocentrism stops working and moves way slower than what should have been. He is the first one that discovers that Rafal was actually working on it, and therefore he is the main reason as to why he ends up dying. If it wasn't because of the keen sense of Novak of something going wrong, or at least going wrong from his own perspective, Rafal would have not died because of heresy, and he would have been able to make way bigger advancements just by itself. And if it wasn't because of Novak, he would have also not been forced to make a convoluted plan in order to just preserve the research that he did for months, maybe a year, I'm not certain in that regard, but he would have not needed to make a huge plan just to do it. Novak is also the main reason as to why both Badeni and Oxy are also found guilty of heresy, because he is the one that discovers them and he is the one that takes all of the information, and he's also the one that puts the whole heliocentrism idea in their most dangerous position, because he managed to put Badeni into the weird position of actually having to talk about what is going on and destroying almost all of the evidence, which is the reason as to why Badeni by itself had to take such an even more convoluted plan in order to preserve a little bit of his own idea of the heliocentrism. And finally, he is the reason as to why Dragna cannot write the whole book about this whole idea, because he basically eliminates the person that can help her, and he also eliminates Dragna herself. Yet, this story has more than just despair, and that is the whole message of it. Novak is a fantastic character, not only because of its characterization, but because of what he represents. He is the embodiment of what is finding the way in order to preserve the status quo, trying to keep things from moving, trying to make the move be stopped. Yet, there's not such a thing as the world stop moving. There's always a way in which the information is gonna flourish. there is always a way in which the curiosity is gonna take over humans. There's always a way in which the world is gonna start moving. And the whole idea of heliocentrism is that one precisely. How the world is actually moving, and it's not the things around us that are moving and us keeping in a still position. But despite all of the efforts of Novak, it was inevitable. It was impossible to keep the world from moving, and as such, the world started moving. Not only because of heliocentrism, but because humans keep the world moving. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed it. If you want more content like this, talking about specific animes and making reviews, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe. It not only helps the channel to grow, but also helps you to make me know that you actually enjoy this content and that you want something like this always, or maybe if you want some small changes. Regardless, without anything else to explain, once again, I hope that you enjoyed it and see you next time. Bye bye!